tonight we've got three topics: karma, wheel of life, and paticca samuppada. There's quite a lot today. I normally try and finish within an hour, but I might just run over today. So the first topic is karma. Karma is basically a Buddhist law which says that actions which we have willed, that means that there is some intention behind it, and these are called volitional actions. Those actions which we have willed will leave behind traces that will manifest themselves in future. In other words, they'll ripen in future. And this manifestation in future will cause us to experience the future events as either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, according to the traces of the original action. And those actions need not just be physical actions. There could be speech. So speech is a verbal action, or there could be thoughts as well. So it could be through body, speech, or mind. Now, karma is one of the most misunderstood and confusing aspects of Buddhist practice. And this is probably because of its adoption in the West into our language to mean a variety of things. In Buddhism, it has a specific meaning to accurately describe a process, and it is this specific meaning that should be understood by us as Buddhists. So I'll just give some examples of how it sometimes is used in our everyday language, and this is not what karma is. Although that word karma is used in this context in everyday life, that's not what karma means in Buddhist terms. So for example, one often hears that if one is born with a bad leg, causing one to limp, that is karma, a retribution for something done in past lives. That's not exactly right. Or sometimes it is looked on as just fate. For example, someone would say, it was my karma for this to happen to me, meaning it was my fate for this to happen to me. And it certainly is not fate. The word karma in Sanskrit means action or doing, and not every action is karmic. It is only actions that are willed, that is, that there is an intention behind it to bring about a specific result, that are karmic. So it is the intention that is the key. And such actions are referred to as volitional actions. And I believe volition has the root volo in Latin, which means I will. So not all actions are volitional. Examples of actions which are not volitional are, for example, when we touch a hot stove and there's a reflex action and we pull our finger away from the hot stove. That is not a karmic action. For karmic action to occur, there has to be an intention, a thought to achieve something. So that particular action is not karmic. Another example, say if you're walking alongside someone and they stumble and our hand reaches out to steady them even before we have thought about anything, even before we have thought anything, the hand just goes out to steady them. That is not volitional because there was no intention. It just happened before any thought or intention arose. So that is not intentional. But having helped that person, if then other thoughts go through our mind that, oh, we did well in helping this person, that is then karmic. But the actual hand just going out is not karmic. And as I said, the label applies not just to physical actions, it can apply equally to verbal and mental behavior. So for example, to idly gossip and slander about someone is a verbal action and will have karmic outflows. And similarly, wishing that I could have this or I could have that, which is a mental action, is also karmic. So, and the karmic actions need not just be bad actions or unwholesome actions. They can even be wholesome actions, like, say, wanting to help victims of an earthquake, for example. That can be karmic as well. It does leave traces. Or they can be neutral actions. For example, when we are offered a choice of tea or coffee and we choose tea, that's a mental action, but it's a neutral karmic action. So according to the theory of karma, actions will ripen and bear fruit. And the ripening or result of karmic actions is called vipaka. And we experience the fruit of our actions whenever they ripen as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, according to whether the karmic action is good, bad, or neutral. And the ripening may happen within a short time of action, or it may take a very long time after the action. In fact, classically it is said that karmic actions can ripen after lifetimes as well. But what karmic theory says is once karmic roots are laid down by a volitional action, they will ripen at some point. That is, all volitional actions have ripening at some point, and they will not just fade away of their own accord. And what is necessary for the ripening to occur is that the right set of circumstances must be present to bring about the ripening. So, and the reason why it works like this is, our brains are really complex. And, when, say, we've hankered after something and then gone out and got it and then felt happy, it leaves traces in our being. And, chances are that at some point we will want to go and get something in future when the right circumstances arise, according to, that previous action. Because we endorsed it by feeling happy. So at the point of ripening, we will experience something, and the problem is, because the world is subject to change, everything is impermanent. Sometimes when we have laid seeds for wanting something, we cannot get it, and that's where the suffering happens. Or another example is, if we are, say, driving and are always driving aggressively, always hooting, always cutting up in front of someone, all those actions are going to leave traces, and we become a driver that is aggressive all the time. And, at some point it could lead to road rage. So that's how our actions ripen. And, the road rage would be experienced as something unpleasant. So Let me give you another example, because, all this may sound a little bit abstract. And this example is, before the pandemic, when we used to go to an office to work. And, I live in London, and say I went for work in the rush hour, and, the tubes used to be packed at rush hours. You could hardly get in some of the carriages. But say, we go to take the tube, and we're determined to get a seat. So as soon as the doors open, we rush in, we've spotted an empty seat, and we go straight for it, hardly noticing the old lady who can hardly walk, whom we are shoved aside and just walked past. And having shoved and pushed, say we get the seat, and we're happy about it, and we congratulate ourselves for getting a seat. And, we dare not look at that old lady, because we know we've done something wrong. And then, having congratulated ourselves on getting the seat, come the next day, having got the seat the previous day, we want to repeat the same thing. And this happens day after day, till that behavior becomes so insistent that we become a person who has to have a seat. So, and, we say, okay, so what's wrong with it? We wanted a seat, and we're using our all our means available to us to get a seat. The thing is, the world is subject to change. Everything is impermanent. We're not always going to be able to control what happens to us. So one day we are hyped up to get the seat, and say either we do not find the seat on that day, or someone has angry words with us for shoving and pushing everyone and getting onto the carriage before everyone has disembarked. Either of those things is not really going to have a good start to the day. So this is how we lay the seeds for what we then experience later on. So this is how we weave the world that is our own making. And it is this world of our own making that we inhabit. We might think that we all inhabit the same world which is out there, but actually what we are living through is this world that we have weaved ourselves, and that's what we are living out of. And that is where we experience suffering. And this is the world that Buddha is addressing. Buddhism is not directly concerned with what's out there. It is more concerned with how we built up the world inside us, and how we're using that, and how that causes us problems, and to understand why it is causing us problems, and to do something about it. And in the example I've just given of the tube, say on the very first day, instead of shoving and pushing, we wanted the seat, but and so we did get the seat by shoving and pushing. But then we noticed that old lady who can hardly stand, and we realize what we've done. We have regret for our action, and we get up and offer our seat to the old lady. That is actually, the start was laying down bad seeds, but that regret was actually laying down good seeds. And this is how the practice actually works. By laying down the good seeds, we actually lessen the impact of the bad seeds that have been laid down, we de-amplify them. I think the word is attenuate. Attenuate means is the opposite of amplifying. So the energy of the unwholesome actions, when those seeds ripen, is not felt as much of a suffering as it would have if we did not have regret in this particular example. So that's how the practice works. We try and reduce the bad karmic seeds. We try and build good karmic seeds. And through that, we come to some sort of understanding of reality. And the reason why it works is basically what's happening is we are de-emphasizing what is important to me, to mine, to myself. And instead, we are opening out to everything that is around us and linking into that. So that is how karma works. And the karmic process is completely impersonal. That is to say, there is no God or any being sitting in judgment and making sure that we are punished for our bad actions and feel the suffering. It's just an entirely impersonal process that's happening. So there's no lawgiver, no one sitting in judgment. It's just how it works. Okay, so that is the subject of karma. Now we will go on to the next topic, which is the wheel of life. Now we have said that karmic outflows can happen in a short time, or it can take a long time, as much as several lifetimes. So there is in Buddhism a belief in rebirth, where the type of rebirth is conditioned by accumulated karma. So if you accumulated a lot of bad karma, then the rebirth will have suffering in it. So there is that belief in rebirth and karma conditioning our rebirth. So now it should be clarified that the aim of the Buddhist practice is to bring to an end this continuous round of rebirth. In the West, we may find this strange. We may think, why do we want to bring this continuous round of rebirth to an end? Because, if we are reborn, we can do things that we have enjoyed and do it all over again. Or maybe even, do some of the things that we missed out on doing. But we have to remember that in the Buddhist worldview, any rebirth is suffering. In thinking we will enjoy and do what we want to in the next life is again to fail to see the basic delusion of I, that we can have pleasure and separate it out from suffering. In the Buddhist worldview, pleasure cannot be separated out from suffering. When all is impermanent, when all is subject to change, pleasure will at some point come to an end and be replaced by suffering. So, for a Buddhist, rather than aiming for rebirth, the aim is total liberation from rebirth. And that is what nirvana is. Now, we can look at rebirth in two senses. There is rebirth from life to life, but there is also rebirth from moment to moment. So during the course of a day, sometimes we may be happy, sometimes we may be sad, and we are migrating through various psychological states during the course of a day. And so, moment by moment, what's in our consciousness is changing. So we can say that, we were born as something, like say a happy being one moment, then that moment comes to an end. And maybe we are born again in a happy moment because that what gave us pleasure is still there. But eventually that goes away and we are unhappy. So that is how we are being reborn in a happy state and then die. That state, we die in that state, and then we are born again in an unhappy state. So that's how the moment-to-moment rebirth works. So for example, we get up and it's a nice day, a nice sunny morning. We draw the curtains in, we are elated in seeing the blue skies. So we're born in a happy state. We go to the bus stop and the bus does not arrive. We're getting impatient and we are not very happy at that moment. So we are in an impatient state at that moment. We might be angry or upset or agitated at that moment. So, all these states we pass through in the course of a day, and that's moment to moment, being born in one state, dying, and being born in another state. And today, when I talk about being reborn, I will talk about it from moment to moment because, this is an introductory course and it's much easier to appreciate that because to understand rebirth from life to life is a pretty difficult thing. Now, this continuous migrating from one state to another is shown in what is called a wheel of life, and I will just put that up on the screen now. Hopefully, all of you can now see the wheel of life on your screens. Look, if there are any problems with me sharing the screens, and if things don't show up, do let me know.
Yes, of course. Don't worry.
Okay, thanks, Lavinia. So this is the wheel of life. So there are wheels or circles within circles here. If you can see, so there's the inner circle, then there's one around it, then there's the circle which is actually divided into 6 sectors, and then there's this outermost circle which has got 12 pictures around it, and this is what we're going to look at now. Now, this picture actually describes samsara, what we are experiencing in our mundane world every day. So this picture is samsara. The wheel is held in the fangs and the claws of a fierce-looking demon called Mara. And Mara actually represents change, this coming to be and ceasing to be. And the Mara actually looks demonic like this, as depicted in the picture. Change is demonic to us. That's how change feels to us, because things that we enjoy, we are separated from, and things that we don't like, we are enjoined with. We're joined with it. That is because of this constant change, this coming to be and ceasing to be. And that is actually, when we really look at it, that is what looks demonic to us. That is what causes us anxiety. That's what causes us fear. That's why Mara is portrayed as a demon. Although, when we go deeper into the teachings, Mara actually plays a very useful role. Okay, so let us start looking at right at the center of the wheel. So I'll just zoom in. And in the innermost circle, you can see that there's a bird, a rooster, a snake, and a boar. These three animals represent the three fires that we've talked about. The fire of greed is represented by the rooster. The fire of anger is represented by the snake. And the fire of delusion is represented by the boar, because the boar, sometimes digs itself into mud and throws mud over it, and it blinds it. So delusion blinds us. So these are the three fires. And what causes us to go around in all the different states, moment after moment, are these three fires. It's the energy in the three fires that cause us to transmigrate in samsara. So that's what's represented in the innermost circle. In the next circle, half of it is dark, and half of it is light. And I will come back to this because it's related to the next circle. The next circle is divided into 6 sectors. So there's one here, and I'll just name what these sectors are. This is the sector of the devas, or the gods. And the next sector going anti-clockwise is that of the fighting demon. This, actually, if some of you are familiar with the wheel of life, usually this fighting demons is on the right-hand side. So the wheel, in fact, goes clockwise rather than anti-clockwise. But this particular depiction is anti-clockwise. You do come across that. And incidentally, if you do want to look up a wheel of life after the lesson, if you Google Buddhist wheel of life, you'll come across many representations of it. So going clockwise, this sector is that of the fighting demons, and they're called asuras. Going further down is the realm of the animals. Further down at the bottom is the hell realms. Then the next realm is that of the hungry ghosts. And the final realm is the human realm. These represent psychological states that you are going through moment to moment, driven by the three fires. And I'll go through each sector and say what each one represents. But basically, the upper sectors are more sort of agreeable states that we end up in, and the bottom ones are the less agreeable states. So for example, the realm of the devas, the gods, is at the top, and the realm of the hell realm is at the bottom. So what the circle just inside, which I said I'll talk about later, which is half dark and half light, represents, is because we are transmigrating, This shows beings on the dark side falling from agreeable states down to states which are not so agreeable on the dark side because of the ripening of their karmic seeds. So it's the karmic seeds that ripen, and the karmic seeds are actually laid down by the three fires, actually. On the lighter side, we are actually rising from the less agreeable states to the more agreeable states. Okay, now to look at each sector in turn, I'll just zoom in into each sector. It does pixelate a little bit, I'm afraid. Okay, so let us look at the first realm, which is the heavenly realm, as I don't say, realm of the gods. Now, this is gods with a small g. There is no belief in God in Buddhism. What is meant by gods with a small g is beings that are born in very pleasant states, sometimes called celestial beings. So the beings here are born in very fortunate, very pleasant state. They enjoy very aesthetic pleasures and lead a relatively carefree existence. Actually, this wheel is not very detailed. Normally, if you're meeting physically, I'd be using a different wheel, which is at the Buddhist Society, which gives a lot more detail. So, for example, you can see the gods enjoying aesthetic pleasures like music, for example. And sorry, I do have that, so I'll just look up. I do have a copy of the wheel that is in the society, and I'll just refer to that as well as I speak. So the gods are enjoying long, carefree existence. They enjoy very long lifespans, and it's a very pleasant experience. This is due to good karmic seeds ripening. But all is subject to change. It is said that when the lifespans of the gods comes to an end, sweat accumulates under their armpits and their clothes become grimy, and their karma, good karma, is used up, and down they go into the lower realms. So that, as I said, these actually represent the psychological states we are in. So this heavenly realm is the state we are in when we feel totally satisfied with the world, how everything is going. Everything seems to be going swimmingly well for us. So that's the realm we are in, is this realm, heavenly realm, when everything's going well for us. Okay, now going to the next realm, that of the fighting demons called Asuras. Asuras have a will to power which only makes them understand force and using anger. We can see that there's a tree growing in their domain, but that tree, if you look, is actually bearing fruit in the heavenly realm. And so the gods, as you can see here, the gods help themselves to the fruit because the fruit is growing in their realm. And this really annoys the Asuras, and they only understand anger and force. So being angry with the devas, they are in constant battle with the devas, and it shows here you're shown the armies of the Asuras in battle. They're always constantly in battle. And the interesting thing is, in this domain, you can see here someone actually chopping the tree. And their anger is such that it blinds them, and they're so angry with the gods helping themselves to the fruit of the tree that they start chopping the tree itself down. The tree that they're fighting over, they start chopping it down. And this actually represents our psychological state of when we are angry, basically. That it's the energy that's in anger that's being represented here. And anger is blind. And this depiction of the man chopping down the tree is a really good depiction of how anger does blind us sometimes. And we cut, as the saying is, we cut our nose to spite our face sometimes. Okay, the next realm is the realm of the animals. And animal, here they're represented by animals on the land and also animals in water. So it's all the animal life. Now, here in the West, we actually sometimes have sentimental connotations about animals, but in East, animals are sometimes looked on as being just helpless living things. They do not have much control over their lives, and they have to deal with whatever circumstances arise to them. So this represents the state when we feel helpless and we are driven by just simply by our instinct, and it's not a very pleasant realm. And an example might be, we of us being in this realm might be, again, an example from before the pandemic. We have a job. I live in London, and maybe I have to commute to the city. Maybe I live in suburbs far away from the city, because the houses near the city are not affordable. So I live very far away, and so I commute every day. Then I do my job, and then I go back home, and I just hardly have time to eat my meal, maybe watch a little bit of television, and then it all starts again, and we feel just miserable being in this rat race. But we don't see any way out, because we have a big mortgage and children to feed as well. And so we seem to be helpless. So that's the state we are in this realm. The next realm below that is that of the hell realm, which is a realm of extreme pain and suffering. In Buddhism, there is no judgment or punishment by an external deity or by God. The pain and torture that we experience here are the consequences of habitually and willfully choosing to indulge in greed, anger, and delusion. And if we do that, if we keep on doing that unskillfully, we will end up in very unpleasant states. And that is what is being depicted. And all sorts of unpleasant things are being depicted in this picture. For example, you can see someone being boiled, beings being boiled alive in a vat here. So there's all sorts of torture going on, that you can see beings hung upside down. And as I say, the will of the society is much more descriptive. You can see people being impaled on stakes, and all sorts of other torture going on in that picture. And classically, it is said that there are 16 hell realms. There are 8 cold hell realms and 8 hot hell realms. The next realm here is the realm of desire. And here you can see a being, for example, here you can see a being with a tiny neck and huge stomach. And what this is depicting is greed, because this being has huge belly, but has only a tiny neck, it can never eat enough to satisfy itself. So it is forever hungry. And that is how desire often fails, it's just insatiable. It just goes on and on. So that depicts desire quite well. And one thing that is in the picture, the society, which I can't see here very well, is that there is someone who feels thirsty, and to quench the thirst, there's a stream, and the being is at the stream, and on taking the water from the stream, the water is turning to fire. And this is again how desire sometimes acts or turns out. The thing that we've desired actually hangs us high and dry. You might remember the story of the golden bowl that I gave in one of the earlier talks, and that is what is depicted there. And the last realm is that of the human realm. And it is said that it is liberation is only possible from the human realm, because to come to terms with the teaching, we need our human understanding, the skills, the intellectual skills that we have are a necessary part, which animals, for example, don't possess. So it is said that to be born in a human realm is actually, we're very lucky to be born in that realm, because there's a possibility that being in this realm, we can actually walk the path and obtain liberation. So in this picture, again, this is not very descriptive in this version of the Wheel of Life, but in the version of the Wheel of Life of the society, there is all sorts of human activity going on. For example, there are people doing meditation, there are people enjoying dinner with friends, there is a merchant caravan, so there's a woman giving birth. So it's just depicting various human activity. And actually, what as I say, the whole wheel of life actually represents us. So, what is so special about this particular sector, and why are we saying that we have to be in this sector to be liberated? Because as I said, these are psychological states that we have. But some of the psychological states really do blind us. The anger, and being in hell realm, it's not very easy to see liberation from there. So it's important to be in this human realm. And what it's actually depicting is the state when we are gently, where we are gentle, truly human, caring, altruistic, kind. For example, in that example, where I said we recognize that old lady needs to sit down, and we get up and give up our seat. That sort of kindness, being gentlemen in the old sense of the word, gentlemen and gentlewomen in the old sense of the word. Courteous. So that's the state when we are in this human realm. So this teaching basically is saying, what samsara is like, and we're being driven around the samsara by the three fires. So that's the wheel of life. And we can now look at the last teaching for today. And we've talked quite a lot or heard quite a lot. Let's just gather ourselves just for a moment before we go on to the next topic. Okay, so on to the next teaching, which is called Pratyeka Samuppada. We got the word Pratyeka Samuppada, which is what we're talking about. It's a Sanskrit word, and there is a Pali version of it as well. Okay, Lavinia. Well, I'll just leave it there for a minute, just in case anyone wants to note this word down. What Pratyeka Samuppada means, or is translated as, is arising due to conditions, or sometimes it's translated as dependent origination. And what it means is that what we're experiencing at the moment does not just arise randomly. There are causes and conditions which have led us to experience what we're experiencing at the moment. And basically, those are the karmic seeds we have laid down, coupled with the ignorance that we have. So ignorance combined with the karmic seeds means we experience a particular moment now, and so it has been brought about by those karmic seeds and by the ignorance. So in Buddhism, Buddhism explains in minute detail, actually, as to how and why we are experiencing something at a particular time. Okay, thank you, Lavinia. I will now try and share the screen again with the Wheel of Life, because there's the teaching of Pratyeka Samuppada on it as well. And Lavinia, again, if you can't see what I'm talking about on the screen with the Wheel of Life, do say something. Okay, so the Pratyeka Samuppada is the teaching which is represented by the 12 pictures on the outermost rim of the wheel. And it's described as 12 links which happening one after the other mean we experience a particular thing at a particular moment. As I say, what you experience does not just randomly arise. It's not just that we're unfortunate to experience suffering. It is due to karmic seeds and ignorance laid down by ourselves. And this actually describes it quite well. Now, this teaching is actually a very profound teaching, and it is actually very difficult to understand. I'm going to attempt to describe it. Chances are people will not understand it at the first hearing of it. And I was talking to someone earlier before we started today's talk, when I say that in Buddhism, we don't just read, say, a book on Buddhism right from the front cover to the back cover and then put it down, then go on to the next book. What we do is we keep on revisiting the teachings, and we keep on revisiting the teachings. And then when that is combined with practice and meditation, is when the teachings actually start opening up. But we have to keep on revisiting them and revisiting them. So even if you don't understand, what Paticca actually is in any detail today, I wouldn't be concerned about it. At least you're aware that there is this teaching. Hopefully you'll get the gist of it, and you will have possibilities of exploring it in future, especially when you start your practice. Okay, so as I say, there are 12 links, and each link gives rise to the next link. So I'll just go through each link in turn. Now, I'll start at the top here. And the picture here represents ignorance. And ignorance is represented by a blind man leading a blind man. And that is what ignorance is like. It's blind, it's completely blind. So that's what's being represented here. And then, dependent on this ignorance, it gives rise to volitional formations, the karmas that we lay down. This is also called samskaras. So the pictorial representation here is that of a potter making things, just like we create pictures in our head. And so just like the potter is making pottery, we weave pictures in our head. So this is what is represented here. So dependent on ignorance arises samskaras, and dependent on samskaras arises consciousness. Now, the first two links have already happened in the past, and now we come to the present moment. And in our present moment, there is consciousness that arises. And consciousness is represented by a monkey jumping here and there, just like our consciousness seems to jump here and there and everywhere. So in this moment, we have consciousness, and dependent on consciousness arises the next link, which is called Nama Rupa. And Nama Rupa is the combination of mental and physical factors that we talked about, which come to make a being. So it's things like judgments that we have are within Nama Rupa. So the consciousness gives rise to Nama. Nama is the mental side, and Rupa is the physical things. And dependent on, so Nama Rupa is actually represented by a boat on a flowing river. So this is because Nama Rupa is this ever-flowing flux of mental and physical factors, which are always forever flowing. So that's why it's represented by a boat floating in a stream. So, and then dependent on Nama Rupa arises sixfold sense bases. And the sixfold sense bases are the six senses that we've already talked about. Those are the five senses that we usually hear about, being that of smell, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. So those are the five. And in Buddhism, we have the sixth one, which is awareness of the mental thoughts. So those are the six senses that we have. So So dependent on nama rupa arise the sixfold sense base, and the sixfold sense base is represented by a house with open doors and windows. So just like the inputs of the outer world come through to us through our senses, and that's what's represented in this picture. So what's happened is, in this moment of consciousness, we have got physical and mental factors forever flowing, and we have sense consciousness of the six senses, making contact with the outside world. And so this, dependent on the sixfold senses, it gives a rise to contact with the outside world. So the senses make contact with the outside world. And this is depicted by lovers embracing, just like our senses embrace their inputs. So we've made, so our senses, which have already been conditioned by bad karmic seeds, or all karmic seeds rather, and ignorance, have now actually made contact with the outside world. So we see something, we hear something, that's the contact that we've made. And then dependent on that contact arises feeling. And feeling is depicted by a man with an arrow in one eye. So just like we are blinded by the feeling that arises in us. So, for example, there's a pleasant feeling and we're blinded by it. And so dependent on feeling, because we're blinded by it, arises craving, which is the next picture here. And craving is depicted by men enjoying drink, just like an alcoholic drink causes us to want more. So what this is depicting is, dependent on this feeling arises craving of wanting something that we found pleasant. And then what next picture is depicting is, dependent on craving arises grasping. So grasping is depicted by someone picking fruit and filling all these baskets here with fruit. So just like grasping prompts us to pick and hold on to things. So that's what this picking of fruit is depicting. So what's happened is, we've made contact with the outside world, we've had a pleasant feeling, so we've craved for something, and craving for something, we have then grasped it, and at that stage we want to hold on to it. And then what happens then is, dependent on grasping arises becoming, and becoming is depicted in the next picture. It is depicted by a couple making love and creating new life. It's just like becoming is something we have created. So just to explain, we've found something pleasant, we've gone out and grasped it, and by continuously grasping, we become something. So for example, in this example of the man who had to have a seat on the tube, he's become a person who has to have a seat every time he goes to work. He's become that sort of a person. And actually, karmic seeds work in wonderful ways. Not only would he be demanding a seat, but there'd be a lot of, when the person lays down those sort of seeds, chances are he would have laid down lots of other seeds where he becomes demanding, wanting things. And that's what he's become. So we grasp things, and we become a certain type of person. And that is what's depicted in the next picture, which is depicting birth. So dependent on becoming arises birth, and birth is depicted by a woman giving birth, which is self-explanatory. So we are born in a particular moment. We are born as this person, who has to have their need fulfilled. So that's what we're born at. And then what happens is, because everything is subject to change, what happens is this birth, dependent on birth, arises old age, sickness, and death, which is portrayed in the next picture. And this is depicted by a corpse being taken to cremation. Actually, this is a Tibetan picture. And in Tibet, traditionally, what happens is when someone dies, they're carried in a basket on the back, like this person is doing, onto a mountain, and they're left there for the vultures. You can see vultures here, for the vultures to eat that body. So that's depicting old age, sickness, and death. So this is how we experience everything. So it's not random. It's conditioned by what's gone on before, and then it's an endless chain. Dependent. We die, but that's not the end of it. We are reborn, and the cycle continues with conditioned by this ignorance and karmic formations, and so we go round and round and round this wheel. We go round and round in samsara. So that's what is being. That is what Praticca Samuppada is. It is a teaching that is difficult to understand, but the gist of it is that we are born with some sort of ignorance, either from a previous moment or from a previous life, and we have laid karmic seeds in previous moments, and then this present moment arises, and in this present moment we have consciousness, we have senses, and these senses make contact with the outside world, and we start finding, because of the karmic seeds we've laid down, we find certain things pleasant, and we want to go, we crave after them, we try and grasp them, we try and hold on to them, and this becomes the norm for us, and then we become a certain type of a person. That is what we are born as, but because it's all impermanent, that moment comes to an end, and then the next moment arises, again conditioned by ignorance and karma, and round the wheel we go. And that's what's depicted in the outermost circle. However, the great teaching of the Buddha is that through practice and insight into this process, the links of the cycle can be broken. And when the links are broken anywhere, really, the whole chain falls apart, and liberation from samsara is possible. And liberation from samsara actually means we step away from this picture into liberation. So we are no longer within this picture. That is what liberation is. And so Buddha's great teaching says that we are not bound to be in this samsara held by this fierce looking demon. We can actually step out of it. And how do we break the chain? It is broken by working with the fires. And where we work with are these links of desire, of what? First of all, finding something pleasant, then craving for it, and then grasping it. Those are the links where we work with it. And how we work with it is that through one of the factors of following the path, which is awareness, we develop a skill to be always aware of what's going on inside us. It's like, there's someone inside us, always constantly chatting or making noise and, wanting this and wanting that. And we're aware that that person is there. Instead of, usually what happens is we're not aware of that person being just a separate thing that's arising. We actually identify with it, and we and the arising are the same thing, and that's our world. But by being aware, we can see that it's just arisings in our mind, in our brains, and we can then start working with it. Classically, how we work with it is we are aware of the arising of the fire. We actually, when we start working with the fires, we actually feel the fire within ourselves. It's the energy that's inside us. So when there's wanting, we feel, something. When we really want something, we feel it in the belly in our belly. Basically, there's like an energy there. So we learn to recognize that. So we become aware of that energy, but we then don't get carried away by that energy. So we don't go on to grasping and becoming, and then an understanding arises as to why this energy is arising, and we learn to contain that energy, and by containing the energy, we learn to be calm, meditative, and in that meditative state, the wisdom arises of its own accord. So that's how we step off the wheel of life. Okay, so I've gone on, as I said, a little bit longer just to cover all these topics. We have come to the end of today's talk, and we have a little bit of time for questions, if people want to ask any questions. And you can ask questions either by unmuting yourself or by putting it to Lavinia through chat.
I have some questions here for you.
Yeah, sure.
So the first question I've got is from Shami.
Yeah.
So karma, is a volitional action the same as a conscious action? And if not, what's the difference?
Well, if by conscious you mean that that there are thoughts in our head, then it can be conscious or it may not be conscious. When I say it may not be conscious, what I mean is that it is there somewhere within our being, but we are not actually aware of it. It is actually driving us. We really want something and we go out and get it, and we don't know actually why we want to do that, why we want to go and get something. So we're not actually aware of it consciously, but it is there somewhere within our being. And that is, and when we act out of it, that is still a volitional action, whether we are conscious or we're not conscious, whether it is in awareness or whether not it is not in awareness, it's still driving us, and therefore it is karmic. And sorry, if I can just say, so when there is no thought arising, where so I gave example of a reflex action of touching a hot stove. There is nothing underneath us within our being that is actually driving us. Our ignorance is not driving us. And this is actually discussed in quite a detail once we go deeper into Buddhism as to what is karmic and what is not karmic, what is volitional and what is not volitional. And basically there is a terminology called dharmas with a small d, and dharmas are elements of consciousness, we can say, and as long as they are present, that means that that anything that is driven by that is actually going to be karmic. But that's sort of advanced Buddhism. So Buddhism does actually deal with it in more detail than I can in this course. Yes, Lavina, any?
Thank you, Rohit. So I have another question here from Rachel. I can understand karma to a certain extent, but how do things like being a victim of murder or rape fit within the concept?
Okay, you know, karma is a very complex thing. Fate is not part of it. And you know, things can happen to us. What Buddhism is describing, and also in the example you're raising, you know, what happens to us could be karmic, or sorry, it could be fate. You know, things just happening because that's how things are working, or it can be karmic. Like there may be elements where you might be responsible for what's happening. So it's very difficult to speak in general about it. When things like murder or rape happen, it could be karmic things, or it could be non-karmic. And when it's non-karmic, there is a teaching of two arrows that Buddha has given. And what it basically says that someone who's not tutored, say in Buddhism, if he's hit by one of these things like murder or rape, is if he's not tutored, is hit by one arrow and really feels distress and is engulfed by distress. Whereas if someone who's tutored and following Buddhist practice, there's a chance that sorry, I've got myself mixed up. It's hit that in the first example, it's hit by two arrows. So the first arrow was the actual incident happening, and so that incident has happened, and then after that incident has happened, we are then hit by a second arrow if you're not tutored. So in that second arrow, what's happening is after that incident has happened, we create a scenario where we create distress for us. We go round and round in circles. That's because we do not understand how things actually work. So the person who's not tutored is hit by these two arrows, whereas a person who has an understanding of Buddhism is actually hit by just one arrow, and that one arrow is the actual incident happening, and that is beyond our control. Falling, hurting ourselves is another example of it. It just happens to us. Or having a toothache, it happens to us. But the person who's untutored then builds on it and laments and cries, whereas the person who's tutored is only hit by that first arrow and is then not hit by the second arrow because they understand a much wider context, and they don't let grief overtake them. They don't let grief overwhelm them. So I hope that answers that to a little extent. And all these things, we can ask questions in abstract, but really the understanding really comes about, rather than speculating on all these things, is really to follow the practice and see all these incidents happening in our lives. And obviously something like murder or rape might be too big a thing to handle to start with, but the energies that are in there are by a liberated person are within what that person can handle. Okay, Lavinia.
Thank you, Rohit. So we have other questions here in the chat, and then Sanjay raised his hand.
Okay. So what was the question on the chart?
So let's proceed with the chat questions for the moment, okay? All right, so the next one is from Sarah. Yeah. How do you connect to love in Buddhism? Is the aim to let go of love totally, or is it about changing your relationship to it?
Okay. I think, if I'm wrong, whoever has asked the question, do correct me. In this context, you mean love for one other person, falling in love with someone. I believe that's what the questioner is asking this question. There's nothing in Buddhism that says that we cannot love someone. Love, and while we're laymen, having a partner or a wife or a husband, love for children, all that is important. As laymen, as human beings, we have to live our lives as human beings. We must always remember the teaching of the middle way. We must not imagine Buddha is pushing us to one extreme or some other extreme. So as far as love is concerned, we can definitely love another person in Buddhism. The only thing we have to understand is that things are impermanent, and the person that we love can, stop existing, through death, or the love itself can go away, and we can be bereft by either of these things happening. So as far as the Buddhist teaching is concerned, there's nothing wrong with loving someone, but the problem is if we haven't understood the teachings, then we want to grasp onto that person, or we want to grasp onto that love. That is where the problems arise. So, in Buddhism, we always have to be careful when we look at all these scenarios and we start imagining things, because, Buddha doesn't want us to do anything unusual with our lives. Actually, our daily lives are our training grounds. So, Buddha is not saying, if you are following Buddhism, you cannot fall in love with someone, you cannot have, someone else in your life. It is, what attitude we have, which is what matters most. Okay.
Thank you, Rohit.
Yeah.
Do we have time for other questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next is another question from Shami. Yeah. A question on the wheel of life.
Yeah.
So did the Buddha himself draw up the first wheel of life diagram as a teaching tool? And if not, who drew it first and when?
Well, in Buddhism, a lot of things have just come about. We do not know how they come about. We do not, there are some beautiful sutras. Sutras are religious writings. They're there. We do not know who's written them. That does not lessen their value. And there's every chance that Buddha actually did not draw this wheel, because if Buddha drew the will, it would form part of, there's a Buddhist canon, which is Buddha's words, and this will would be described in that. It's not. What it is, I think what would have happened in this case is, as people practiced and they saw the teachings, they understood it, and they wanted to explain it to other people, they saw that, by devising something like a wheel of life, it is actually possible to explain these teachings in a different way, and, people have different capacities, or certain people understand certain things one way, certain people understand it a different way. And so that's how this variety of teachings come out. but we mustn't be too pedantic about it. Okay, I hope that answers.
Thank you. So, a question from Susan. Does the wheel of life applies to Theravada Buddhism?
Yes, it does, in the sense that it's all the teachings it's giving are within Theravada Buddhism. The three fires, the wandering through the samsaras, praticca samuppada is a very important teaching of Theravada. So it does apply to Theravada Buddhism, the teaching contained within the wheel, that is.
Thank you, Rohit.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. Sorry, just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so a question from Sandra.
Yeah.
Do the various Buddhist paths have different views of the wheel of life?
Sorry?
Do the various Buddhist paths have different views of the wheel of life?
Different views. So in other words, different meanings that they attach to wheel of life. No. As far as the wheel of life is concerned, all the Buddhist path would be saying the same thing about it. Next week, we'll be talking about Mahayana, where at a very deep level, there is divergence in the teachings between what we've been talking so far, which is really from Theravada Buddhism, to what we'll talk about next week, which is Mahayana Buddhism. And there is different understanding at a very profound level. So that there is a change there. But as far as the wheel of life is concerned, I don't think it says anything different within Mahayana or Theravada. I think it's the same thing, really. Because wheel of life is really giving teachings at a very basic level. It's not going at a very deep level, which is where the teachings slightly differ. Okay, I think, Lavinia, we'll have maybe 2 more questions.
Yes. So there is another here from Chloe.
Yeah.
Please, can you repeat your thoughts on Jung, selfhood, and Buddhism from last week?
Okay, Jung, and then what else?
Selfhood and Buddhism.
Okay, so actually, my teacher, under whom I trained, who's now passed away, Venerable Miyakuni, who actually wrote the book Living Buddhism. She was a great believer in Jung, and she was a Zen teacher. She trained in a Zen monastery, and she said that these teachings of for example, arising of the energy within us of wanting, craving, are actually almost foreign to the Western mind. But she said that through Jung, you can actually start actually understanding these teachings, because Jung actually described the same things arising of these energies. Sometimes, some energies are dark and driving us. Some energies are really hidden deep inside us, and we have to bring it into consciousness. All these things that I've been talking about. As far as I know, I don't know Jung that well. As far as I know, Jung talks about that, and in a way that Western mind can understand, and then through that they can gain an understanding of Buddhism as well. So Jung and Buddhism can complement each other. If someone is minded, is drawn towards Jung and also drawn towards Buddhism, they will be able to, once they start understanding it, they will be able to connect what's being said by Jung and what's being said by Buddhism, they will be able to connect that. Okay, last, if you can have the last question.
Thanks, Rohit. So I have no more questions here in the chat, but maybe, yes, I think somebody is raising their hand.
Okay, Sanjay, that's Sanjay. Okay, Sanjay, if you want to answer, ask the question. Sanjay, you need to unmute yourself and.
Okay. Okay.
Are you able to put your video on so I can see you as well? If you are.
Oh yes, sure. Hi.
Hi.
Hello from Midwest of America.
Oh, well, you're all the way there. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So my question was related to the wheel of life.
Yeah.
So in one spot you said that these states, these are mental states, or is it actually real states? Because I know that in some place Buddha also mentioned the existence of beings like yaksha and gods, which are not human states.
Yeah.
So when you showed us those pictures, so there were the states of like heavenly realms.
Yeah.
So can I assume that right now there's like a parallel realm where these heavenly beings exist?
No, no. Buddhism, in Buddhism, that's definitely not so. You know, when all these realms, all these beings are talked about, it's like mythology, and sometimes we find it difficult to understand certain things when it's given in black and white, or it doesn't convey the same picture when something is given in black and white. Whereas when something is expressed in mythological terms, it actually brings it out even more. It really gives a very rounded picture of exactly what it is. And this is what is referred to when all these strange beings are talked about. When we talk about the heavenly realm, when we talk about devas, they are not certain beings that exist in some world somewhere. Buddha is not talking about that. Buddha is always talking about us and ourselves, and these beings are what resides in us. That that's what it is, and they're depicted as those beings because, as I say, it brings it out much more clearly, in a much more rounded way, what is being pointed at. So mythology has a use. Mythology should not be taken literally. And so I hope that answers your question.
Yes, because it looks like there are many different interpretations of this thing, like in different sects, right? Like in Mahayana. Because if you Google this, I was Googling this deities and all that stuff, it says it's a non-human existence. And Buddha also agreed that there's states like yaksha, which is non-human existence. So,
well, non-human in that sense, probably. I don't know exactly what you read, but what it probably means is when we are not acting as human beings, when we're, say, for example, when we're acting as wild animals, we are wild animals. We may have the form of a human being, but we are wild animals at that moment, and I think that's what's being talked about there. But even in Mahayana, none of these mythological beings are real in the sense that they're physical entities existing somewhere. It is all the world that is inside us. It's very important to understand that Buddha is always talking about the world that we're carrying in our heads. Buddha is not talking about some strange world out there, and if we connect it through that, we'll be saved. It's not like that at all. Buddha is always, always, always talking about the world that is inside us. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, we'll end tonight's talk. And so next week, as I said, we will be starting on the development from Theravada Buddhism, which is what we talked about, to Mahayana, which is a further development of Buddhism. So we'll talk about that next week. Okay, so hope to see you all next week then.